Hello, I'm Alexei Pecci. It's currently the night of May 6th to May 7th. And right at this very moment, a war has actually started between India and Pakistan. Right now, the Indian armed forces have launched a large-scale operation called Sindoor. According to the official representative of the Indian Army, strikes were carried out on militant camps located on the territory of Pakistan and in the Kashmir region, which is under the control of Islamabad. India claims that it is carrying out only precision strikes on military targets and military infrastructure. Pakistan has already closed its airspace. Now the first footage of the airstrikes is appearing online. And that's why we'll split this episode into two parts with you. In the first part, we'll go over the latest operational information, what's happening right now between India and Pakistan, where explosions are being heard, and what exactly India is attacking. And in the second part, we'll look at the background of this conflict and analyze what's happening, why it's happening, what triggered this escalation, and what all of this could lead to. So, there are two parts. First, the operational update, and then the analysis and breakdown of the current situation. It can be stated that India has indeed started carrying out strikes against Pakistan. And the day before, Pakistani officials were making such threatening statements, saying that if India attacks Pakistan, there will be no peace left in the world at all. Why do they make such statements? Because both India and Pakistan possess nuclear weapons. The Pakistanis, in the style of Russian President Vladimir Putin, now declare that if there is no Pakistan, there will be no world at all. We will start bombing everyone indiscriminately. And this is the message to the world community. So, let's sort everything out one by one. What is known at this moment? Right now, India has announced the start of the Sindoor military operation, during which, as they put it, precision strikes were carried out on terrorist infrastructure in the territory of Pakistan and Pakistani Kashmir. The Indian armed forces have launched a large-scale operation called Sindoor. According to the official representative of the Indian Army, strikes were carried out on militant camps in the territory of Pakistan and in the Kashmir region controlled by Islamabad. The Indian side emphasizes that only terrorist targets were chosen and that Pakistani military forces were allegedly not attacked, so the military should not respond to these attacks in any way. At the same time, Pakistani sources confirm missile strikes on 3 locations in their territory and report power outages in Kashmir. The representative of Pakistan called India's actions unprovoked aggression and has already promised retaliatory measures. A few minutes earlier, it was reported that the situation on the line of control in Kashmir had escalated, and according to media reports, clashes between India and Pakistan have begun. Tensions have flared up again in Kashmir, not just limited to missile strikes. Pakistani journalists report missile strikes by India on positions of the Pakistani army. Still, explosions can be heard in the area. According to local media, India was the first to open fire. But at the time of publishing this video, there have been no official confirmations of these reports from the authorities of either country. But later, the armies did start communicating about this issue and stated that yes, indeed, strikes are being carried out. What else is known from operational information is that in Pakistan, basically in several regions, these explosions are being heard. Pakistan has already announced that it is closing its airspace completely to all aircraft, and this will be in effect for 48 hours. In addition, intense gunfire, artillery shelling, and powerful explosions have been recorded in 2 border areas of Indian Kashmir. This was reported to the agency by a police representative and eyewitnesses. In addition to missile strikes, artillery and small arms are now being used. In addition, videos are appearing in which Pakistanis claim that India blew up a Pakistani mosque in Kashmir with its missile. Pakistani military confirmed that India launched missiles at 3 positions in Pakistan and in territories under Pakistani control, and that Pakistan will respond with full force. It is worth noting here that on the eve, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi confirmed that India will no longer supply water to Pakistan. This is a crucial point, and we'll revisit it in the second part of this broadcast. And so Narendra Modi stated that India has stopped supplying river water to Pakistan. Next, I will quote him. In the media over the past few days, there has been a lot of discussion about water. Previously, water belonging to India was flowing out of the country. Now this has been stopped. Now, India's water will be used only to serve India's interests. It will be preserved for the benefit of India and used for India's progress. Well, let me remind you here that it's the 5th of May. It was reported earlier that India had stopped supplying water to Pakistan through the Baglihar Dam, which is located on the Chenab River in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. India is currently attacking there. Before that, the Indian authorities suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, which regulates the use of several rivers by both countries. This agreement was signed back in the 1960s of the last century. And indeed, there are several rivers that originate in India and then carry water into Pakistan. And accordingly, India could actually unilaterally cut off this water supply. And then a drought begins. In Pakistan, the agricultural sector suffers greatly, and accordingly for Pakistan, it is truly a major tragedy when India cuts off the water. An agreement was signed to prevent this. That is, supposedly the waters of the Indus River can be used by both countries. And it seems that for many decades this was observed. Now India is cutting off the water and says that they are completely withdrawing from this agreement. Relations between India and Pakistan deteriorated after militants opened fire on a crowded tourist spot in northern India on April 22nd, and 26 people were killed then. But we will also return to this issue with you when we discuss the root causes of the current tension and the present outbreak of conflict. But before we get to that, I want to present you with a very interesting quote. This is a quote from Pakistan's Minister of Defense, Khawaja Asif, who today, right before the start of these attacks by India on Pakistan, stated the following, quote, "If India attacks, if the existence of Pakistan is threatened, no one will survive. We will not allow any country to live on this planet without us. God forbid, but that's exactly how it will be."
That's the kind of resolve we have. If Modi tried to apply what is being applied in Gaza or what Netanyahu is doing or what Netanyahu has done, those who are supporting this, who are helping to apply this, who are making this an issue. So here Pakistan will respond in such a way that the memory of history of how a nation responded will be remembered in the future. History khiyad rahegi India.
Pakistan.
If our lives were in danger, if such a step was taken against us, like Pakistan, Kudan, Kasta, if God willed it, if our existence was in danger, then if it wasn't us, then no one would have been. It's a simple thing.
You know, these words of Asif really remind me of the words of the Russian leader Vladimir Putin, who said, like, why do we need it? What are you if there is no Russia? That's exactly the same thing being repeated. And the danger of such statements lies in the fact that both India and Pakistan possess nuclear weapons. Accordingly, if this conflict escalates into a very hot, catastrophic phase, it's not out of the question that one of the sides might use nuclear weapons. And now we move on to the second part of this episode. It will probably be more interesting because, in fact, the current situation is not really unique. For the relationship between Pakistan and India, a certain cyclical nature is typical. I'll explain why now. If we take a more recent period in the 21st century, then over the last 25 years, there have been several major similar events. There have been at least 5 such terrorist acts. And almost every one of them led to a worsening of relations between India and Pakistan, to increased rhetoric from both sides, and to tension along the line of control. The attack in Pahalgam is what happened in April. You can compare the situations of 2019 and 2016 when there were major militant attacks in the Indian part of Kashmir. Kashmir is a territory that belongs to both sides, and accordingly part of it is controlled by Pakistan and part by India. Unlike the attack on April 23rd, this year those attacks in 2019 and 2016 were not directed against civilians but against Indian military personnel. The Indian government, led by the same party, took action in both 2016 and 2019. It's important to note that this government remains in power today. The Indian People's Party, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, responded quite harshly, both in terms of rhetoric and in terms of such signals. Raids were carried out on the Pakistani part of Kashmir, which in Indian terminology is called Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. In 2019, there were airstrikes, like the ones happening now on terrorist bases, but both times these retaliatory actions did not lead to any escalations and were of a limited nature. India attacked terrorist bases, stating they didn't touch Pakistani military forces. The Pakistani military responded, and that's where everything stopped. This time, immediately after the attack, a counter-terrorist operation was announced by the Indian security forces, and the Indian security forces, if we look now, this morning, Indian media reported that evacuation drills are already being conducted in the border regions. An air raid alert was tested and separate lessons were held for children on what to do in case of war. So, well, this time the situation is a bit more tense than it was in 2016 and 2019 when a counter-terrorism operation was announced on the eve of those events. As part of this operation, about 10 houses were destroyed. Suspects of involvement in various terrorist attacks. Not only the attack in Pahalgam, but also those suspected of participating in terrorist groups. So did India want to limit itself to this? This operation caused protests because during it, neighboring houses of ordinary peaceful residents were also affected. The buildings there are quite densely packed, so the local residents were also affected and began to protest. So in New Delhi, a week after the attack, the situation was quite calm and it seemed like people had breathed a sigh of relief. Pakistan then declared they would definitely respond. That's what happened there. There was news about some protest actions near the Pakistani embassy. At the same time, they also had this kind of double signal. On the one hand, it seemed like the authorities were saying that the cordons and barriers near the Pakistani embassy were being removed. On the other hand, the police guaranteed that all the actions would remain strictly peaceful and tried not to allow, let's say, any increase in the activity of this protest movement. And it seemed like everything was heading toward calm, but no, now India is actually attacking Pakistan. And in general now about Kashmir, why is the situation there like that? India and Pakistan have been disputing the territory of Kashmir for more than 70 years and have already fought 2 full-scale wars over it. In terms of the number of civilian casualties, the attack on tourists on April 20th of this year became the largest in this region in the last 20 years. In summary, the attack claimed 26 lives. India accused Islamabad of being involved in this attack, although out of the 4 attackers, only 2 were citizens of Pakistan, while the other 2 participants in the attack were Indian nationals. Pakistan denies having any involvement in the attack in Kashmir, and India has also not yet presented any evidence of Islamabad's involvement. However, both sides immediately took a number of tough measures. India downgraded its diplomatic relations with Pakistan, almost halved the number of embassy staff, and announced the closure of the only land border crossing between the 2 countries. Visas for Pakistanis issued under the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation visa exemption scheme were decided to be completely cancelled, and Pakistanis began to be expelled from India en masse. The government of Pakistan in turn suspended visas for Indian citizens except for Sikh pilgrims, declared Indian military advisors persona non grata, and ordered them to leave the country as well. Pakistan's airspace was closed to all airlines belonging to or operated by India. The main border post at Agach was also closed, and all trade, including the transit of goods, was halted. In addition, India suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, which was concluded in 1960. As I mentioned earlier, it was in the 1960s, specifically 1960. At the unrecognized border between the 2 countries, for about a week now, there have been sporadic exchanges of fire, which are periodically initiated by troops stationed on both sides of the demarcation line. Special attention to the conflict is explained by the fact that India and Pakistan possess nuclear weapons, although they have never used them in previous conflicts. But still, everyone, of course, is very much afraid of this situation. On the other hand, we must understand the outrage of the Pakistani defense minister, who has begun threatening the entire world. And he says that if India attacks Pakistan, Pakistan will not be left alone in this trouble. If it starts to sink, it will drag everyone down with it, hinting at the use of nuclear weapons. The message is clear for one simple reason. India, for example, might, well, an investigation will likely show, though I don't know for certain, but it might, to use French Rafale fighter jets, which can carry out strikes remotely, that is, directly from Indian airspace. What you can see in these frames now is that airstrikes are being carried out, and most likely India is using French Rafale fighter jets. And here you can already blame France for this. At the same time, the strike on the Pakistani city of Muridki will most likely lead to heavy civilian casualties. That's why no one is striking there yet. Because such a strike could undermine the support that India enjoys on the world stage. Pakistan, in turn, of course, will now try to give a proportional response, but will try to hit even more targets than India. This could trigger a cycle of escalation. Pakistan could also strike Indian military targets, which would inevitably cause huge outrage in India. India will then strike not only terrorist targets, but military ones as well. That is, now this escalation spiral could start spinning. On the other hand, it should be understood that in recent years, the international situation has changed significantly. And now, after withdrawing their troops from Afghanistan in 2021, the United States of America is already less interested in cooperating with Pakistan. The United States and India are still forging closer ties, a closer partnership. And former Indian ambassador to Pakistan, Ajay Bisaria, noted that India can now try to persuade the United States to impose sanctions against a number of Pakistani military officials and government representatives. And he also suggests that India will demand a review of the decision to grant Pakistan a $7 billion International Monetary Fund loan. So, besides the military operation, now the economy and sanctions might also come into play. One of India's main allies is indeed the United States of America. The relationship between the two countries has grown significantly in the past 10-15 years, including militarily and in security. And India, which for many years bought Soviet weapons from Russia, is now, after the start of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, completely switching to purchasing Western weapons. And now new contracts are being signed, and accordingly India is beginning to turn more toward the United States of America. We shouldn't forget that under the previous administration of President Joe Biden, America completely turned a blind eye to the fact that India purchases inexpensive raw materials like oil and crude oil from Russia, refines them into petroleum products, and sells these to the West at regular prices. So it's like a kind of processor. Therefore, India, of course, wouldn't want to quarrel with Americans and Europeans, and India is in a much more advantageous position here. So now we see that during the administration of Donald Trump, the dialogue between India and the United States is increasing, particularly in the area of combating terrorism. The United States is meeting India halfway on absolutely many demands. At the same time, after the first statements from the White House condemning terrorism a week after the attack, the United States demonstrated a more neutral position. Here is United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a meeting with his Indian and Pakistani colleagues, calling on both sides for restraint and dialogue. Well, that's traditional diplomatic rhetoric, which is meant to somewhat cool down the tensions. It's absolutely acceptable in this situation. But at the same time, many note that China immediately took a more neutral and restrained position than many countries that in the first hours after the attack fully sided with India. It's evident that China and India have conflicts with each other. In April, Beijing mentioned that it recognizes Pakistan's legitimate interests and repeated Pakistani rhetoric that an investigation is necessary. Well, of course, it's important to understand here that China is a very close partner of Pakistan, especially in recent years, and their relationship is almost like an alliance. So we see a situation where India could gain support from the United States and Pakistan could hypothetically receive support from China. Russia also takes a kind of neutral position, and in the perception of the Indian side, Russia has now become a more neutral party due to the development of relations with Pakistan. Yes, there is, of course, a nuance here. For Russia, India is still the largest importer of weapons, while Russia does not supply weapons to Pakistan respecting India's red lines. But at the diplomatic level, for example, in the United Nations, Russia no longer blocks the discussion of the Kashmir issue, including those initiatives started by China. And therefore, of course, there are discussions in India that for diplomatic support on the Kashmir issue, India should probably turn to other partners such as the United States and France. I mentioned the Rafale aircraft for a specific reason. Although, of course, I think that such a positive neutrality from Russia, well, let's put positive in quotes, for India is still important. They will ensure Russia doesn't interfere at all, although Russia is unlikely to interfere in principle. And right now, it's definitely not up to that. Russia is waging this bloody, completely unprovoked war against Ukraine, so that's why the conflict is shaping up this way. At the moment, I think the whole situation, what's happening, is becoming more or less clear. You could say that right now India, I wouldn't say is going all in, but nevertheless, they also couldn't leave this terrorist attack unanswered. Pakistan, right at this very moment as this episode is being recorded, has started artillery shelling in response to India's strikes, and a Pakistani official has stated that so the response from Pakistan to India will be both on the ground and in the air, meaning most likely they will now be sending up aircraft and everything else. In addition, it is now being reported that Pakistan has carried out retaliatory strikes on targets in India. Islamabad has begun the process of retribution, and Pakistan's Defense Minister Khawaja Asim has stated that Islamabad will deliver an even stronger response to India's strikes. A Pakistan Defense Ministry representative earlier called India's attack disgraceful and cowardly. According to him, and I quote, "Pakistan will respond at the time and place of its choosing." So let me once again give a brief report at the end about what is known at the moment. India. The Indian operation called Sindoor against Pakistan. Here is what we know at the moment. Let me briefly summarize the results. The armed forces of India carried out strikes on 9 targets, which they describe as terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan and in the areas of Jammu and Kashmir occupied by Pakistan, from where terrorist attacks against India were planned and launched. This is a statement from the Ministry of Defense of India. Missile strikes have already been carried out on Katli, Bahawalpur and Muzaffarabad. At least 1 person was killed and 2 were injured near Bahawalpur. There is a power outage in Kashmir. Pakistan has stated that it will respond to what they call unprovoked aggression by India. Earlier, the Minister of Defense of Pakistan stated that no one on the planet would remain alive if India wins the war. Both nations have nuclear arms. Pakistan closed its airspace to all flights for 48 hours. Pakistani aviation has been scrambled, and now Pakistani aviation will be targeting Indian positions. Well, in general, for now, we can just leave it at that. I think that by morning we'll have much more information, and then we can put it all together and discuss it again. So at this point, I think if you still have questions about this conflict, what's happening there and why, please write to my Telegram channel. The Telegram channel is called, and the link to it is in the description of this video. I'll leave a quick response code here on the screen so you can go to the Telegram channel, subscribe, and ask your questions there. I will definitely address them in the next episode. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, click the bell, and don't forget to leave a like. Friends, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel financially, I would really appreciate it. You can do this with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. Or become a sponsor of this channel on the platform by clicking the sponsor button below this video, or use the quick response code on your screens. This platform is the easiest and most convenient way to support the work of this channel. I will be grateful, that's all. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.